Everyone agrees that California is suffering from a severe shortage of affordable housing. Could accessory dwelling units, commonly referred to as granny flats, be part of the solution? We'll ask three researchers from the California Budget and Policy Center who recently examined that very issue. Monica Davalos, Aureo Mesquita, and Adriana Ramos-Yamamoto.
BNSF Railway, moving our economy for 160 years. BNSF, the engine that connects us. Additional funding for the Maddy report made possible by a grant from the wonderful company, harvesting health and happiness around the world. From the California Channel at the State Capitol and the Maddy Institute, it's the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Mark Keppler.
Welcome. California's housing crisis has been growing for almost a decade, and reports are that new construction permits continue to fall short. The bottom line is there's simply not enough homes being built fast enough to meet demand. But does everyone need or even want a 3 or 4 bedroom home? Could granny flats, these detached dwelling units, be at least part of the answer? Our guest has examined that issue. He is Aureo Mesquita, a research associate with the nonpartisan California Budget and Policy Center. Welcome to the Maddy Report.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of California's housing crisis.
Right. So a recent Budget Center analysis found that 8 in 10 households that make below 200% of the federal poverty line are paying more than 30% of their income solely on housing costs.
Just housing?
Just housing. So take a family of 4, for example, earning roughly $50,000 a year. They're paying just over 30% of their income solely on housing. And there's another layer to that, that 2 in 3 people that struggle to pay for housing are people of color. So we have a huge issue on our hands, and we believe that we requires various different policy options to solve this and help those who struggle every day.
All the tools in the toolbox, and this is one of them.
And this is one of them.
And you're talking about, in your report about, poverty is a major issue in California. So draw the connection, then I think you kind of already have, but just draw even a clear connection between housing and poverty.
Right. So California's poverty rate is ranked #1 among all 50 states.
I think it would surprise a lot of people.
If we look at the supplemental poverty measure, which takes into account the varying costs of living in different parts of the state. And research has shown that the primary drivers of this high poverty rate is the high cost of housing, as well as the lack of affordable housing. And also, we can't talk about this without talking about the fact that wages are stagnating. While housing costs are increasing, wages haven't increased much.
Yeah, there's this thing that they're talking about. We call them granny flats, and there are other in-law units, other ways you can refer to these, but under the law, I guess they're called accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, is an abbreviation. Is there something, so that's what people generally refer to as like a granny flat, right? Some detached dwelling in your backyard where people can live.
Right. So there are various names for it, granny flats, secondary units, in-laws, but what it is just a structure that could be attached or detached from the main house. And the key is that they have independent living facilities. So a bathroom, a kitchen, a place to sleep. And also a door that leads to the exterior, so that someone doesn't have to go through the primary, through the primary house.
It seems like these things already exist out there, right? There's a lot of people that probably converted a garage into an apartment, and I assume a good number of these are not permitted. So what does that mean in terms of living conditions if you have this unpermitted granny flat, and how many of them exist in California?
Right. So literature, there's a consensus that the majority of ADUs are unpermitted.
A lot of people doing this.
A lot of people doing this.
Okay.
We don't necessarily know what the numbers are. There was a study in Los Angeles area about 5 years ago that estimated over 25,000 unpermitted ADUs.
Lot.
And so that just sort of gives us a glimpse, right, into the size of the issue. And the main problem with unpermitted ADUs is exactly that. We don't know what the living conditions are. They haven't been inspected, there's no oversight, and we can't ensure that they meet certain criteria that protects renters.
Right. The whole point of having zoning codes and these requirements is you want to make sure these dwellings are safe.
Right.
And if someone just throws something up in their backyard, maybe not so much.
Right.
And you said 25,000 were found to be unpermitted in Los Angeles alone a few years ago.
Yes.
So just extrapolate that out statewide. We're talking a large number.
A large number.
Yeah, and I would think that also in more expensive areas you're going to see probably even more of this happening, I would guess, because because rents are so high in places like Los Angeles.
Right, right. The research, shows that this is throughout California.
Right. So some cities and jurisdictions have set up these amnesty programs to get these unpermitted granny flats up to code.
Right.
How successful have they been?
Right. So there's been a few cities that are trying some different things out. If we take Marin, for example, they've been able to, in just 2 years, bring up 60 units up to code. And the way they've structured their program is coupling fee reductions with a limited period. So folks have a year, 2 years to come in and sign up their ADU, and they'll get some fees reduced. So that's proven successful there. Really, we need more research to find out what the impacts are actually, would be on a larger scale.
Yeah, we need to know what are the triggers, right? Why do people build these units? Why would they want to permit these units, and what's going to be motivational for them to do it? Right. And we don't know that right now.
We don't know that right now. We know some of the main barriers, fees, parking restrictions, and so forth. And that's.
Well, what about higher rents? I mean, if someone brings their dwelling unit up to code, they might turn around and say, well, it's nicer, I'm going to charge more in rent. Right.
So what we do know is that these programs would ensure that health and safety standards are met for these units. We're not sure. We need more research to better understand what the dynamics would be on rent and how that may play out at a larger scale throughout the state.
Yeah, I think that's something we have to look at closer. But up next, we're going to talk about the connection between housing and health. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. We're now joined by Adriana Ramos-Yamamoto and Monica Davalos from the nonpartisan California Budget and Policy Center. We're discussing the possibility of building these so-called granny flats as a way of dealing with California's housing crisis. And we're talking about units that are probably in the 400 to 600 square foot range, detached from the main house. So the California Budget and Policy Center was specifically looking at the health impacts of developing granny flats. Can you explain the connection between these granny flats, or whatever you want to call them, and health?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the connection between housing and health in general. Okay. There's a growing understanding that where you live affects your health. So the affordability of housing, the quality of housing, stability of housing, the physical conditions within the homes, the social conditions in the neighborhoods and the communities, that all affects health outcomes. But I want to focus here on housing affordability. Housing is commonly considered to be affordable when a family spends less than 30% of income on rent or mortgage. And research shows that families that experience difficulty paying rent, mortgage, utility bills are more likely to lack a sufficient food supply, and they're more likely to have a less consistent source.
They're spending all their money on rent and housing.
That's right, and there's an opportunity cost of that. And in extreme cases, difficulty paying rent or mortgage can even lead to homelessness in extreme cases, and that, as you know, is very detrimental to health. So making housing more affordable could lead to a change in income-related health outcomes for renters and homeowners, including a decrease in chronic health conditions and mental health conditions such as stress and anxiety.
Yeah, stress results in health issues. I read somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, that they said, it might have been a study out of the University of Wisconsin, that said that your zip code is more important to your health than whether or not you have access to a doctor, whether you have insurance, rather, whether you have insurance. So where you live really matters when it comes to health.
Absolutely.
So what are some of the potential safety and health effects of addressing unpermitted granny flats? These unpermitted granny flats. What are some of the health effects?
Yeah, so addressing the issue of unpermitted ADUs may help to achieve a higher level of housing quality. We know that healthy homes promote good health, and when I mean health, I'm talking about physical health and mental health. And good health depends on having homes that are safe and free from physical hazards such as carbon monoxide, allergens, lead in paint, pipes, faucets, that sort of thing. And poor housing conditions, we know, are associated with negative health outcomes such as injury, chronic disease, and poor mental health. So when any residential unit is brought to proper permitting standards, and in this case we're talking about unpermitted ADUs, it may help these units meet health and safety standards that are less harmful to an occupant's health.
Because a lot of these are kind of like people saying, oh, that's a good idea, let's change the garage into an apartment, or put something in the backyard, and there might be painting with lead paint, and it may not be safe from a fire standpoint, the electrical work might be suspect. all kinds of health issues associated with that, I would assume.
Exactly.
So getting those non-permitted or unpermitted permitted granny flats up to speed is kind of, I would seem to be related to health. So Monica, let me ask you this. What about the potential effects of expanding granny flats regarding these neighborhood-based resources?
Yeah, so currently we know that low-income neighborhoods tend to be lower resource areas, and because of this, individuals who live there, they tend to be more exposed to, being obese or having chronic health conditions. And this is primarily due to the fact that, there's a high density of fast food restaurants, lack of accessibility to fresh foods, and they're usually neighborhoods that aren't really conducive to physical activity. And that's why it's really important.
They may not have sidewalks.
Exactly, yeah. So, and that's why it's really important to build or ADUs in higher resource areas where the amenities that they benefit from can benefit other individuals. Right. And that's usually in the form of, higher performing schools with better resources, public transit, and even better police protections.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit in your report about infill development as a way to increase social and economic diversity in neighborhoods. That's another way to deal with it?
Yeah, so by building ADUs, it's essentially infill development because you're using the land that's already existent with these resources. Right. And so when you create those additional housing units, it gives people the incentive to move into areas that they normally wouldn't be, and this is usually in the form of different socioeconomic backgrounds and different racial and ethnic backgrounds.
One of the things you also kind of mentioned, I think the term they use is food deserts, right, where you literally can't access good food. The only you've got is, I don't want to pick on any fast food restaurant, nothing by name, but that's all you have access to. And so those are high fat, high sugar, bad for your health.
Yeah.
And so these ADUs moving into some of these more moderate income or high income areas gives these people opportunity to access better food.
Yeah, that's correct.
Directly access out. Okay, so that's a pretty easy connection. Well, up next, there's pending legislation that may dramatically accelerate the development of granny flats in residential communities. Is that a good idea or a bad idea? That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. By now, most are aware that California has a housing crisis. Indeed, there's an estimated backlog of about 2.3 million housing units. Some think facilitating the development of granny flats may be part of the answer. We're talking with Aureo Mesquita and Monica Davalos with the Nonpartisan California Budget and Policy Center. So I guess it's Aureo, we're going to talk with you first about this pending legislation. So there's pending legislation that may dramatically accelerate the development of granny flats in residential communities, Senate Bill 13. What would it do to facilitate granny flats?
Right. So currently, local governments regulate ADUs given specific requirements by the state. So this gives local governments the opportunity to regulate in the way that they would like. And this also has caused varying
different standards.
Different standards across many cities. And what
a lot of jurisdictions. You got 58 counties.
58 counties.
God knows how many cities and stuff. Yeah.
Right. So SB 13 would try to refine these standards and to streamline a little bit more the process. Okay. Specifically, one of the major barriers to building ADUs are parking requirements. So what SB 13 would do, if let's say you tear down your garage and you want to put an ADU there, cities would no longer be able to impose on the owner to replace that parking spot with on-street parking or something of the sorts. And so that would definitely facilitate, the process for owners. Also, it would speed up the review process. Currently, cities can take up to 120 days to review the application.
You often hear that from developers, that it takes too long.
It takes too long
to get through the process.
It takes too long. And so SB 13 would shorten that by half to 60 days.
Wow.
So that's a significant change. And also, there's this owner occupancy requirement that many cities will impose, that the owner has to live either at the main house or at the ADU, and SB 13 would change that as well.
Okay. So, so why are granny flats seen as a possible solution to the housing crisis?
So addressing the housing crisis requires a mix of policy solutions. We think there's no one silver bullet, and we have to tackle it in different ways. We found through our research that ADUs could be a part of that solution, for sure. They provide a unique opportunity to build more homes without direct government investment, and also build in areas that prevent large-scale development, right? Multifamily or like large-scale apartment
And we were talking
buildings.
about, when we were off camera, talking about the LAO had a report a number of years ago saying that, yes, government is a part of the solution here, but government cannot solve the housing crisis in California. It really needs to be solved in large measure by the private sector, and this seems like one possible solution.
We think that there needs to be, a number of solutions.
All the tools in the toolbox.
All the tools,
right,
and
right.
ADU is one way to tackle the problem from a different angle and provide another, type of affordable option, housing for Californians who really are struggling to pay for housing costs and make ends meet.
And this makes it easier because you don't have any land costs. The person already has the land. The construction duration is short, so it makes it more affordable. So, Monica, I want to ask you about the potential effects of SB 13 on housing stability for homeowners. What did you find there?
Yeah, so our research really found two primary ways that it'll affect housing stability. And particularly if homeowners do go on and build ADUs, they can use that additional income to supplement, what they already have, and this increases their financial stability.
Now they can pay their mortgage with it, it's more disposable income.
Yeah, and then the second thing we mainly found was that it would be particularly beneficial for middle-aged and elderly Californians, especially those who do choose to build an ADU, because it further incentivizes kind of aging in place and
which a lot of people want to do.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah. The other thing too is I just was thinking as you're talking that a lot of middle-aged people and seniors haven't saved a lot for their retirement. This is another way to supplement that income in an era where we don't have a lot of traditional pensions, right? A lot of people haven't put money aside in a 401k. They're going to need this money to survive. They can't live on Social Security alone. So this is maybe another option. This is not the first attempt, Monica, is it, to facilitate the development of granny flats? I mean, this has happened before. What's happened before when they tried to increase the number of these units?
Yeah, so as you said, there has been previous legislation passed, but there are still multiple barriers to the development of ADUs, mainly in the form of development fees and other building codes. But the recent legislation passed that actually took effect in 2017, that they aimed to really streamline the process of ADUs, as well as eliminate some of the parking barriers, as you mentioned.
And they've got some good data in San Diego and in Oakland and Los Angeles where it has had an effect.
Yeah. So within major cities around California, there has been an increase after these regulations were passed. LA specifically saw kind of one of the bigger jumps. In 2016, they went from having 80 applications, and then in 2017, that number rose to a little under 2,000.
Wow, that is a big jump. So what about the effects on the supply of permanent housing?
Yeah, so research does show strong evidence that if someone builds an ADU, they do eventually turn that into permanent housing. Specifically, there was a survey conducted in the East Bay area where 85% of homeowners who had an ADU reported to use that as permanent housing.
85%, that's really high. And I was reading a report that Oregon did a study too, it was 82%, so that you're seeing some consistent numbers there. What about, Aureo, what about the supply of affordable housing? Does this affect that supply as well?
Yes, so research shows that ADUs are more affordable than other units within that given neighborhood context, in part because of its size. But research also shows that without further government regulations, it may be hard for us to ensure that these ADUs remain affordable.
For some people, particularly with low income.
Right, and there's been different strategies throughout the state. For example, there's the Backyard Homes Project in Los Angeles that are providing technical assistance and helping owners build ADUs.
Right.
In return, they'll rent their ADUs.
And you're also seeing that in Clovis, in the Central Valley.
In Clovis as well.
Okay, so up next, who are most likely to be affected by the development of this kind of housing? That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. I'm Mark Keppler with the Maddy Institute. Just to keep pace with its growing population, California needs an average of 180,000 homes per year, according to state housing officials. Last year, around 110,000 new residential permits were pulled, so that's 70,000 units short. We're talking with Aureo Mesquita and Adriana Ramos-Yamamoto with the Nonpartisan California Budget Policy Center about granny flats, for lack of a better way to say it. So who's likely to be most positively affected by expanded availability of granny flats, Aureo?
Right. So research shows that ADUs are composed by smaller households, so that's 1 or 2 people. Oftentimes younger adults, so think maybe students. This could be a good option for
Seems
college
like a really
town.
good option for college students.
Right. Also, as we mentioned earlier, seniors could benefit greatly from this, especially as they age, have less income. And additionally, it's important to note, again, that 2 in 3 people who struggle to afford housing are people of color. Right. And we also found that the most restrictive laws surrounding ADUs are in communities of color. Could be various reasons for that. We need more research to better understand those dynamics. But a bill like this that facilitates these buildings, that ensures that they meet health and safety standards, could have especially a lot of benefits for those communities.
Yeah, Adriana, I want to ask you though about the development of granite flats. You say in your report that they could be particularly beneficial for middle-aged and elderly homeowners. Why do you say that?
That's right. So the development of ADUs could allow middle-aged and elderly homeowners to more easily remain in their homes as they transition into having a fixed or reduced income toward the end of their lives.
Aging in place. You know,
That's right.
Anybody who has a parent knows they don't want to move out of their home. They really would prefer, if they could, to stay where they are. Yeah,
research shows that aging in place significantly reduces stress and improves mental health among seniors, as you just said.
Yeah.
The income from renting out either an ADU or the main house could help older adults achieve the financial stability that they need in order to age in place, which allows them to stay near their established networks.
Right.
And it also decreases the risk of isolation and depression.
Which is very important, and people don't realize how important isolation can be for a senior. The other thing that was interesting is opinion polls, you cited 70 to 80% of baby boomers express a preference for aging in place. So you're seeing this population aging, this silver tsunami, and they want to do this. They want to stay at home. This is age in place, and this may allow them to do that. So Adriana, I want to also ask you about, do these granite flats improve the situation for renters? And if so, how?
Yeah, so our research shows that the development of ADUs could improve the situation for renters in a couple of ways. So it could lead to an increase in the overall supply of housing, which would potentially reduce the cost of housing in the overall market.
It's basic supply and demand, right? Economics 101.
More specifically, it could be expected to slow the rate of increase in the cost of housing compared to the increase that we would expect to see without adding any units to the housing supply. Ultimately, it's just one additional housing option for renters. And secondly, building ADUs in well-established resource areas could improve opportunities for renters to be healthy. These well-established resource areas promote health by providing places for folks to exercise, such as parks and bike paths, and they provide access to grocery stores that sell fresh produce and have fewer fast food restaurants. And lastly, they provide access to really important public resources, such as well-funded schools and efficient transportation.
Yeah, I think that the flip side of that, which probably needs to be studied, is what effect do these granite flats have on the property values of adjacent property owners? That's another thing, because you want to have community support for these things. If people feel it's adversely affecting their property values, they may push back. If it shows no, it's not, then they'll be more supportive. But Aureo, I want to ask you this: how big an impact, if we do this, how big of an impact is the expanded use of granite flats going to have on California's housing crisis?
Right. So I think addressing this crisis requires a mix of policy solutions and tackling it from different angles. ADUs could definitely be a part of that. Increasing the supply of permanent and affordable housing in these areas that offer few opportunities for larger scale development. We think that there can be a significant increase in the supply of affordable housing, and as we know, California needs housing. It needs it quickly, and this could be another option for affordable housing.
One of the things I think you've all stressed is there's no silver bullet here, but this is one tool in the toolbox for the housing crisis. I want to thank our guests, Aureo Mesquita, Adriana Ramos-Yamamoto, and Monica Davalos for joining us. They're from the California Budget and Policy Center. If you want to stay current on state and local politics, you can log on to the Maddy Institute website and find out more about the Maddy Institute. This is Mark Keppler from the Maddy Institute. Thanks for joining us. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect those of the California Channel or the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about the points and opinions expressed on the Maddy Report, visit our website at maddyinstitute.org.